Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's great. It's great to be during this conference. So what we'll be talking about achieving clinical effectiveness in spine practice, the role of national spine registries. These are the topics that we'll be talking about. What are the registries and their purpose? Which is better, registries or RCTs? The role of national spine registries, and where does the Saudi Spine Society stand right now? So Ernest Codman was one of the leaders who started the whole concept of outcome research and the whole idea of registries and collecting patient data over a long time. And he's considered the father of patient registries. So how do we define patient registry? It's an organized system that uses observational study methods to collect uniform data. And the whole idea is to evaluate specified outcomes for a population for a defined purpose for a particular disease or condition or exposure. And the whole idea of that is to serve one or more of a determined scientific clinical purpose. So this is, in a nutshell, there are many definitions for patient registries, but this is one of the commonly used definitions. What are the different purposes of registries? There are lots of purposes. These are the major ones. We use them to describe natural history of disease. We use them to determine the clinical or cost effectiveness of intervention, as well as we use them to assess the safety or harm for patients and to measure, improve the quality of care. There are different types of registries, especially if you are talking surgical devices, or we can have registries for a whole disease or condition, or more commonly used the health service research, which is basically assessing the whole effectiveness of procedures. What do you mean by health services research? It's to examine how people get access to health care, how much care costs, and what happens to patients as a result of that intervention. And this is a continuation of what Dr. Hanas Sohail mentioned the first lecture about the outcome measures, and what Dr. Krainer mentioned regarding the clinical practice guidelines. So the eventual goal of health services research compared to clinical research is to identify what are the effective way to deliver the care, to avoid errors, and to improve patient safety. It's complementary and it's interacting. The clinical research and the health service research complement each other in order to improve the eventual patient care. And you can see here registry data as a cornerstone of the health services research. We know that the clinical practice guideline is the gold standard of clinical research. However, usually we start with efficacy studies to see, does this really work in the clinical trials? And then we go to effectiveness. Does it work in the clinical practice? And then eventually we assess it with registry studies to see, does it contribute to efficiency and resource utilization? So we say that the registry is a real data and the randomized trial is an experimental studies. This is the whole spectrum of translational research. We start with basic science all the way to population health. So at the top of the spectrum, or the extreme of the spectrum, lies the patient registries or the clinical registries, because they are at the population level. So as I mentioned, it's real data. It contributes to patient safety information. There are lots of global spine registries. These are some of the examples. Swedish was one of the first spine registries to be established, then the Eurospine, and then other countries followed their pathways. There are a couple of interesting findings with the stories of registries. Majority of them had an impact at the national level, where they have decreased the bed utilization. They have lowered the cost. And that's where you can see here a very nice example from Eurospine, where you can see the differences in hospital and bed utilization between different countries, in UK being the most efficient utilization of resources. The the National Surgical Quality, the NSQIP database. Again, it showed great examples of success stories there as well. So in order to improve the quality of care eventually, we need to collect and analyze data properly. So this is what Dr. Hannah mentioned earlier. I'm going to focus on the clinical practice guidelines, the registry, and the research committee. It's very well interconnected. This is the framework and the idea that we have at the Saudi Spine Society. We started with formally communicating with the Saudi Health Council with a formal letter, and then we started with a questionnaire sent to all members regarding the feasibility of doing a registry, and then we assembled a task force that has started for a couple of months now, discussing, do we need to do this registry? What are the challenges? And we brainstormed quite a lot. We came up with more than 40 questions for us to answer during this registry. I'm not going to take you through all the 40 questions, but to summarize, they talk about the governance, about the sites, about the database itself, about the policies and procedures, quality assurance, and the publications. Lots of debates, lots of questions, lots of uncertainties among these 10 members who represent all the sectors of Saudi Arabia. So these are some of the preliminary model that we have. We thought that we need an oversight committee, we need a steering committee, we need a liaison committee and scientific committee without specifying names or just drawing the whole recommendation, and that will be shared with all members of the society and with the board of directors. These are because we don't want to put only one recommendation. We splitted all the different functions of the registry, and we gave different options. So for each function, the function of the technical function, the site recruitment function, we gave option 1, option 2, option 3, option 4. So we are not limiting ourselves to one plan only. We thought if there are lots of registries out there, do we need to develop our own, or should we join existing registries? So there is one out of the 10, one voted for joining another registry, and 9 of us voted for building our own registries. And these are the pros and cons. We don't need to go through them, just for you to appreciate how meticulous the process of the decision-making of the task force. Again, the group is split between should we start with trauma, deformity, or degenerative. I would say 50-50 is talking about the deformity or degenerative registry. We haven't decided yet, but that will be communicated with the group soon. These are some of the challenges. We have challenges with the methodology, challenges with the logistics, challenges with the sustainability. If this board of directors finished, so what would happen with this registry? How can we ensure that the sustainability is there? And there are always that politics. Why do I need to join a registry? What's in it for me? So these are some of the challenges that the registry task force are discussing and proposing different solutions for them to be solved proactively. So what's next? As I mentioned, we'll share the reports with you and with all the members, and then the final report will be shared with the board of directors for their final decision. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for collaboration, and I will conclude with this. 2 years ago from today, 2 years ago, the Saudi Spine Society was a dream, but today it's a reality. So the same thing. I think the registry, as we're talking about today, it's still a dream, but definitely, inshallah, within a couple of years, I would say it will be a reality, and we invite everyone who's interested to be involved in this project to email the task force team at this email, registry@saudispine.org. And at the same time, as a continuation of Dr. Krina's talk earlier, the clinical practice guidelines, we will be sharing, we'll be sending emails to all the members to invite them to be involved in the clinical practice guidelines teams, which will be announced after the conference immediately. Thank you very much for listening.